Hello there, my name is James, and welcome to Midnight Codes, where I code at not midnight because I'm in Tokyo, but it's midnight or close to it in a lot of the important parts of the world. So here we go. So today I'm going to be walking through the process of creating a new app with Firebase and create React app. And so I'm going to show you how to set up hosting. I'm going to show you how to set up functions. I'm going to walk you through the process of actually creating an app with Create React App. But first, I've got a question from Twitter. Let me just find it on my other monitor. From I don't know how you say your name, but Helton Nord. I'm sorry, I'm terrible with names. But the question is, why not use Netlify instead of Firebase? And so this is actually a really good question, I think. I've struggled with similar things myself. Like, I'm like, do I use Firebase? Do I use Zite's product? Do I use Netlify? And for me, the main thing that Netlify and Zite are lacking compared to Firebase is the database. And so I'm not actually going to be covering the database today, but let me just bring up some information on it. So basically, the idea of Firebase's database is you get this database which you don't have to manage, and you can save stuff to the cloud, and you can read stuff to the cloud. And the really great thing about the Firebase database is that as you save stuff, anyone else who's connected gets those updates in real time. So it just makes it really easy to create interactive applications. And so Netlify and Zite are lacking that. They have a lot of the other features. So they still have authentication, like identity. At least in Netlify's case, they have functions. I know Zite has functions as well, and I'm going to be showing you how to use functions today. And functions are really handy. And Netlify has this forms thing, which Firebase doesn't have. And I think forms can probably get you some of what you need or what you could use from database. But I mean, I've really enjoyed using the Firebase database, and so that's one of the main reasons I'm going to use Firebase over Netlify. Okay, but let's jump in. So I'm just going to start by creating an app. So simplest way to do that is with Create React App. I like Create React App. You just type npm init React App as long as you've got Node installed. Actually, let me do one thing. If you are just new to this, you need to know that you have Node installed, and you can test that by typing npx nyancat. I just found out this yesterday, so I have to show someone. There we go. If this works, then you have Node installed. Okay, so assuming you have Node installed, then just type npm init react-app and then the name of your app. I'm just going to call it Firebase demo. And then that takes a few seconds. So once this is done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a little bit about Create React App. So yeah, well, this is loading. This is not much here, but it doesn't take very long. And so once this is done, what happens is you can edit files, and it'll automatically reload them. So I'm just going to make sure that that's working before diving into the Firebase stuff. Yep, this takes a little bit of time. If you're watching this afterwards, you can skip through, but if you're watching live, you just have to kind of, oh, there we go. So let's do yarn start. Sorry, I have to cd into the directory. And it's telling me yarn start, but I'm going to actually do npm start. You can use both. Yarn is just like npm. And I'm going to try and stick to npm when I remember, because it's kind of more common than yarn, I think. So when I do npm start after doing npm init react app, then I get this spitty React thing. Give it a second. Spitty React thing, yes. And as you can see, it says edit source/app.js and save to reload. So let's do that. Let's go into source/app.js and change this to hello world, as is tradition. There we go. So the React stuff is all working. The build system's working. This is nice and easy, but this is on localhost 3000. If I paste this link into the chat, then and you try and open it, it's not going to work. So what I want to do is host it on the internet. And there's a number of different ways we could do it. You could use Netlify, like mentioned earlier. You could use Zite, or you could use just Firebase, because Firebase includes hosting. And you know, I mean, if we're going to use Firebase authentication eventually and functions, then we may as well just use the hosting. So let's do that. So I am going to create a Firebase project, which is the first step to using Firebase's hosting. So if I click add project, oh, actually, how do I get here? I just type Firebase console into the Googles and click the first link. And yep, here we go. Add project, Firebase demo. Oh shit, I've been creating too many projects because I've been like testing out these demos, so I'm gonna have to like start using the same projects. I delete them. Apparently deleted projects count toward my project limit. Okay, so create your project, and this will be done in a second. Yep, it will be done in a second. There we go. And we have a project. So how do we actually use this for hosting though? So what you would first need to do is you'll need to install the npm, you need to install the Firebase tools package globally, because this gives you some command line tools which you need to use when you're working with Firebase. So I've already got it installed, but I think I should just be able to install it again. Yep, something like this. And then once you've done that, you go back to your project and inside of your project, you type Firebase in it. And that will set up the Firebase configuration for your new React project. Let's just wait for Firebase tools to install again. And then let's run Firebase init and generate some configuration. And this should ask you, oh sorry, before Firebase init, I forgot one step. You need to log in. You need to tell the command line tool who you are, and to do that you just type Firebase login. So this step comes after installing Firebase tools and before Firebase init. So this will show you this, and I'm just gonna sign in. Yep. Okay, now I can, oops, wrong terminal. Now I can do this. So here we go. I'm logged in. Now I can finally do Firebase init and initialize some configuration. So I'm just going to select hosting at the start. Eventually we're going to use functions and Firestore. But let's just start with hosting. We can always run Firebase init again later to add more configuration. This will ask a few questions. It'll ask to pick the project. So let's just pick the one we just created. You can see that F24D9 is the same as what we have here, so that's the right one. What do you want to use as a public directory? So this is an interesting question as well. This is saying, what files do you want to serve? Okay, so let's find which files we want to serve. So we have this React app. How are we going to figure out where the files are? Well, let's view source, I guess. So we got this static file. So these are the files we want to serve. We want to serve this file, the index.html file that you're looking at. And we also want to serve these JavaScript files. So where are they? There is no static directory. There's no files. Okay, so in order to serve the files, you have to build them. If you've used Create React App before, you probably already know that. But if not, then this is how you get those files. You go into your React projects directory and you just type npm run script build. Or if you're using yarn build. They both work just as well as each other. So what this does is that it creates this build directory. You might have seen it pop up if you're watching this part of the screen. I wasn't. But okay, what it does, first it copies everything in public across to build. And then it actually creates a copy of these scripts, which can be, well, served or hosted. And we're going to use those scripts. We're going to use them with Firebase hosting so that you can view, well, basically so that we can host the website. So this looks like it's done. Here we've got these scripts now. You got index.html. Yeah, that is done. So now we have an answer though. What do we want to use for a public directory? We want to use the build folder. Do we configure it as a single page app? Yes. So this is another interesting thing. We need to configure it as a single page app because there's only one index.html file, no matter which file you're looking at. We don't want to overwrite it. There we go. That's all done. So I think hosting should be as simple as Firebase deploy -only hosting. Well, we've only got Firebase hosting set up, but let's just get into the habit of doing this, because otherwise it will deploy everything. So -only hosting, moment of truth. This should, fingers crossed, this should give us a URL that I can share and can put in the chat, where you can basically look at the app that I've got here. So let's give this a try. Hey, sorry, is it Joan or Yuan or, I'm not very good with names from that part of the world because I'm from Australia and yeah, but hi, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, just put them in the box. Okay, so we've got this hosting URL. If I just copy and paste this into the browser, you'll see that this is now on the internet. Yay! And okay, and I'm going to paste this into the chat, and so you can check for yourself now that if you click that link in the chat, then you'll be able to see this. This is actually hosted on the internet, and this is the thing that we just put together. So that's the hosting part done. What's next? What's next is we want to actually create some functions, because well, a static app is kind of boring, and there's a whole bunch of ways to do a static app, but functions are what make Firebase really interesting. So I'm just going to close this online version and go back to the local version. And to set up functions, I'm going to just initialize functions using Firebase init again. So Firebase init, what do we want to initialize this time? We just want to initialize functions. Let's just use JavaScript. ESLint. I'm going to use default settings. Do you want to install npm dependencies? Yes, of course we do. So that'll start adding some stuff to the project. You'll see that we've now got this functions directory, and it has index.js, and this is actually where your function code goes. But before I add any function code, what is a function? So it's basically just a function. At least from your React app, it looks like a function. You call it, you get a promise to a result. The thing is, the function isn't actually hosted within the app. It's not a static piece of code. It's hosted within Google's cloud, and so you can do stuff in private in your functions and then return the results to your app. And I'm just going to show you how this works, because it's easier, I think, to show than try and explain. So I'm going to start by creating a Firebase.js file, which is what I'm going to use to actually call these functions from within the client. And before I jump back into Firebase.js, I'm going to actually have to add another package to the project as well. I'm going to have to add the Firebase package, which includes sort of client code which you use to actually access the result of those functions from within your app. There we go. So once that is installed, what we'll be able to do is import. What do we import? Let's Firebase from Firebase/app. And we also want to import Firebase/functions. Okay, so now, and then we need to actually give it some configuration so that our React app knows what Firebase app to talk to. So to do that, we call Firebase.initialize app, and we need to have some settings, obviously. So what are the settings? To get them, we go back to the Firebase console. And to get these settings, what you have to do is go to project overview. And this is, unless they've changed it again, it changed a few days ago. So I think what you do now, I'm just going to click that button again and point it out because it's a little bit tricky. Oops, wrong button. Let's a little bit tricky to find, I think. So you got to go to Project Overview and then click Add App. And then you select Web. Then you have to give your app a name. So we're just going to call it My Web App because I can't be bothered thinking of a name. I don't think this name is actually important. I've never seen it pop up anywhere. And just click Register App. You don't have to worry about anything else. And so when you do that, you get this code, this blob of or object full of settings, and you just copy and paste that into initialize app. And of course, when you do call this, I mean, when you do have a real app, you probably don't want to put this directly inside this object. You might want to put it in an environment variable or something, but let's just put this here for now. It's all public information anyway, so you don't have to worry about people seeing it. Okay, I just saw a message from Joan DC. I'm sorry, I don't know if I got your name right. Firebase functions, custom functions that are executed when a Firebase event happens. Yeah, so that's a really good point. You can do that. I mean, you can have a Firebase function execute when, say, someone logs in or creates an account, or when they delete an account, or you can have these functions execute in response to events, which is really useful. Now, the other thing you can have Firebase functions do is just act as kind of like an API for your client as well. So, yeah, actually having them execute in response to their events is really useful. I'm not going to show you how to do that today, though. But maybe I'll cover that in another video because it is a really cool feature. So in any case, we've got this app initialized now, and we need to actually basically just write a function and call it. So to write a function, you just export a function. Well, not a function, a Firebase function. You'll see what that does in a moment. What are we going to export? Let's create a get current time or get server time or something function, which just returns the current time. And it's not just a standard function on the server side. It's actually initialized using functions.https.onCall. And then that receives whatever the arguments were that you passed into your function on the server side, sorry, on the client side. And we can just do whatever. We can just return like new date. There we go. So unless I've done something wrong, which I usually do, this should work. And so now we need to actually set up the function on the client side as well. So to do that, first I need to set up functions equals firebase.functions. And then let me just look at my notes because I usually copy and paste this part because there's usually a bunch of functions in this file I can copy and paste from. So functions.https callable. So what this is saying is we're basically just going to create a get server time function. So when you call https callable and you pass in the name, just a string name of one of those functions that you've defined in index.js under the functions folder, then under this functions folder, then you receive a function and you can just call it, which is really cool. Okay, so we've got get server time. We've got our server-side function. Let's try calling it. So to do that, I can just go into app.js. Let's just get rid of a bit of this stuff here. I'm going to shrink this so I can work and see our results automatically. Okay, let's get rid of a bit of stuff. And I should be able to import a get server time from Firebase. And then I should just be able to call it. Of course, this is going to return a promise, but let's just call it first and take a look at the result in the browser console. Okay, so this hasn't worked. What's gone wrong? Access to fetch. So this is actually trying to fetch it's just trying to call the function on Google servers. And I haven't sent the function to Google servers or anything, so it makes sense kind of that it's not working. So now we could deploy this to Google servers, but I mean, I think it's important to be able to test things locally. So let's actually set this up so that the function can be tested locally. So to do that, I first need to start up the development server, the Firebase one, the Firebase functions one. So we say Firebase serve dash only functions. If you don't add dash only functions, then it'll also try and serve the HTML, which doesn't make sense because Create React App is serving that. So there we go, Firebase serve dash only functions. That'll start up a development server. And just one thing, you have to, if you add a new function, you have to restart the server. If you change an existing function, it picks it up automatically, and that's fine. But if you add a new function, then you have to restart the server. So keep that in mind. Okay, so we've got this HTTP localhost 5000. So we've got our function is being served on localhost now. Now, if you look at this again, you'll see that this is not calling localhost. So we have to actually tell it, okay, that we want to use the development server. And I am going to copy and paste again. You can always find this in the documentation. But the way that we tell it is we say if, actually I won't copy and paste, I'm going to delete that and I'm going to type it in and explain as I go. So if process.env.node.env equals, well, it's not equal to production. So basically, if we're using the development server, then use functions emulator. And then we just have to pass in the address. And this is why it's important to use dash only functions, because if you don't, then this is 5001. But because we use dash only functions, it's 5000. So if I save that and take a look again, what happens? Well, I am, yeah, here we go. I've got data. Now, and okay, here's another interesting thing, right? So if you have a look in the function, what we're doing is we're returning a new date. The thing is, this is, well, it's a HTTP call is what's happening under the hood. So if I break this out, or just make this window a bit bigger so you can see what's going on. When we call getServerTime, what happens? When we call getServerTime here, what happens is that Firebase actually makes a HTTP call. And then under the hood, this is just like basically any old API. And you'll see that what it's returning is, well, this, which comes from this string. And you think, okay, so how do you turn a date object into a string? Well, it can't do it automatically. If you do JSON.stringify, it'll turn it into an actual string. But instead of doing that, the way I like to do this is to call getTime, which turns it into a number, which is, I think, a little bit easier to work with. But I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that you have to return serializable stuff. You can't just return any object. It has to be like strings and numbers and stuff. So let's do this. And because I just saved the function, I have to restart the client. The function will be restarted automatically, but the client has to be refreshed if you want to call it again. Okay, we get this number. Cool, so that number represents the current time. And I can format that number by saying new date and then passing the number in, because what does that number mean? It's the number of seconds since 1970, January 1st, I think. Anyway, it's just kind of like a convention that computers use. So if I pass in the number of seconds since 1970, January 1st to a new date, then it creates a date object. And then I think it's to local date. Let's see. Let's see. Nope, to local date is not a function. The IntelliSense is taking forever. I think this is because I'm live streaming, and so my computer is like dying, and usually this just pops up, and so I don't have to remember it. But here we go. To local date string is the one I was looking for. So now if we wait a second, then to local date string should pop up any or not. Okay, so I just remembered the problem, and you might have seen it earlier on. This X here, this isn't actually the number that I returned. And this is one of the, I think, kind of annoying things about Firebase functions. Like, probably one of the annoying things is that it wraps everything in this data object, so you need to destructure it. So you could just say x.data, or let's make things a little bit more descriptive so we can destructure it doing something like this. So data server time. Okay, if I do this, then it should log the time. There we go. We've logged the date. Okay, so one last thing. Let's do one last thing, and let's use some hooks, some shiny React hooks to actually display this information. So to do that, what we'll do is we'll create a state hook that stores the server time. And if you haven't used hooks before, this is a lot like just calling set state, except the main difference is that instead of having to merge things into an object, you can just use like individual pieces of state. So we have this set server time function, which we can call to set some state. We do just need to call this. We don't want to call it on every render though. We only want to call it on the first render. So what we can do for that is we can use effect. And for use effect, you just pass it a function, and this function will be called whenever the component is rendered. So let's do this, and then let's call set server time with that value to store it in the state. Of course, you don't want to call this every time that the app component is rendered. We only want to call it the first time. And the way that we do that is we need to tell useEffect, we need to give it an array of dependencies of things which kind of, I haven't figured out a good way of explaining this way, but let's just say this is like on mount. But people get angry at me when I say that. So it's not like on mount, because when you pass this, you're saying this is not dependent on anything, so it doesn't ever have to change. Whereas if I was to pass something else into here, which I don't have, then it would call this every time that anything in here changes. There's nothing in there, so it doesn't change. That's a mouthful. Let's just take a look at how it works. So we have this server time variable, which is going to contain undefined until we set some value that we receive from the server. So if it's equal to undefined, then loading. Otherwise, let's just display it. Here we go. What have I done? What? Okay, I think this happened when I was actually messing around with this yesterday. I'm just going to restart the server, and I think that will make it work. I don't know why this popped up. Anyway, and while we're restarting the server, let's do one more thing, and let's deploy this new function to the internet. So to do that, I'm just going to say Firebase deploy, and this time, instead of deploying the HTML, let's deploy the functions. So this will take a second too. This is apparently not working. I don't like it when things don't work, but it happens every time. Can't resolve Babel preset. But it was working. Okay, let's remove the hooks and see if it works. I'm pretty sure it stopped working when I added hooks. Oh, this is bizarre. Okay, let me do the thing that people do, and let me just remove node modules and reinstall it. I think that's gonna be the trick. Did I say yarn start instead of npm start? No, I said npm start. Anyway, This is how you solve problems in JavaScript, is you remove all of the node modules and then you just install them again. Do we have all the correct node modules? We do. So npm install, and after that, let's start the server. In the meantime, we are still deploying functions. And wow, in the last day, I was doing this yesterday and it was using node 6, but now it's using node 8, which is, it's actually great because node 8 allows you to use async and await. And I was about to show you how you need to make async await, what you need to do to make async await work, but apparently you don't have to do that anymore. So that's going to make this video a whole lot shorter. Awesome. Okay, so the functions are deployed. Now we're just waiting on getting this working. So let me take, let's do something else though in the meantime. So there's another thing, is that whenever you want to deploy your app, you first have to build it with Create React App, right? So you can do that manually, but it's a whole lot easier to just tell Firebase, hey, every time I want to deploy the hosting, let's build the app. So to do that, I go into the hosting section of firebase.json, and let's add a new section called pre-deploy. And that's just an array of commands to run. So run script build. So this just says that, every time we say every time we say Firebase deploy -- only hosting, we're going to run the build script first. So once npm modules or the node modules are installed again, we'll be able to do that hopefully. What else can I show you in the meantime though? So if we go into the Firebase, let's go back to the console. And it's actually possible to set up a custom domain for your app. So I don't have a custom domain that I can put this demo on, but it's something that you're probably going to want to do if you're making a real app. So let's just take a quick look at how to do this. So you go into the hosting section, and then within hosting, there is a domains panel, and you can just click connect domain. Now, if you do that, then there's one thing that you'll have to do, which is you have to add a public URL to the build script in package.json. And I would show you that, but it looks like the node modules have finished installing, and now Create React App is starting again. So let's see if this works. Fingers crossed. I don't think it's going to work because, it never works, but it would be nice if it did. Just this once. Oh, there we go. Loading. And we have the time. We don't have the time I wanted. I wanted the formatted time. So let's just do that. Let's do one more thing and add the formatted time. Server time equals, so let's, I am not using Prettier, which formats stuff for you. So I'm going to just do this manually. Then we say new date, pass in the number, and then to local date string. Yeah, there we go. It all works. So now I just noticed that there's a Firebase Yuan is saying Firebase config is not secure. They are in the front end. Yeah, so that's true. Firebase config is, everything in the configuration is visible to anyone who's looking at your app. So for example, if I was to look at this is going to be visible to everyone in the app. The thing is, this doesn't really matter because, it has to be visible to everyone in the app in order to be able to pass it to initialize app. But there's ways to configure stuff which is private, and yeah, so that's like if you want to use an API in your backend, which is actually what I'm going to do probably in the next video, as I'm going to show you how to call a real API as opposed to just returning the server time, then you need to use this functions.config thing, and you can set up configuration on the local function server, and you can set it up on the actual Firebase functions. And yeah, so that's how you store private config. So I'm gonna go into that in the next video. if you want to watch that. Or if you want to find out how to use this for something real, then you definitely want to watch that. So subscribe. In the meantime, if you want to learn more about Create React App, then you should totally check out my course, React and Bacon. And so this course is, let me just log in so you can see the course material. So this is kind of a work in progress at the moment. The next thing I'm going to be putting up is more information on Firebase, but it goes into detail on more about how Create React App works, why you'd want to use Create React App in the first place, and it also covers styling everything with styled components. Next, I'm going to be adding some stuff on Firebase, and then I'm going to be adding more information on hooks. So I'm going to be using React hooks to set up a form, which actually is already online. So this is what you're building, is this landing form here. So yeah, if you're interested in learning more about this, definitely check out the course or subscribe, and I'm going to be doing more of these videos showing you basically how to build a real world app with Firebase and React and eventually Stripe. So hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye. And then let me wait and find my stop streaming button. Okay, I'm going for the good this time. Goodbye.